Everybody, welcome to Random Musings from the Clinical Trials Guru. I almost forgot my podcast name, Raymond. This is Dan Sfera. I've got Raymond Nomizu on. Did I pronounce that correctly?
That's right. Yep.
From clinicalresearch.io. They're a CTMS, and they also do eSource, which is in a 2018 world, no longer science fiction, but a reality. And it's going to be what we're all going to use. So just be prepared. But Raymond started at the site level. And I've interviewed Raymond once or twice before on the podcast, but there's a whole lot of new audience members now. That was almost a year ago, I think, Raymond, our last interview. First of all, before we get into your origins story, how's the business, clinicalresearch.io? How has it evolved since last year?
Good. I mean, we've continued to add new sites. We're starting to attract the attention of pretty large site networks. I think they were a little more conservative and they wanted to see other sites sort of prove the technology and prove our company. We're talking to some very, very large and serious players about this. I think that the conversation with sites has changed in the last 3 years since we started selling this. 3 years ago, it was a novelty. We had to convince people it was actually okay, that the FDA wasn't going to shut them down, all of that. Now, I would say probably 4 out of 5 sites flat out just tell me, I recognize this is the future. I know, you don't have to tell me that this is the direction the industry's headed in. Now it's just a question of when is my site ready to do this?
Right.
Of course, there's still all kinds of reasons why a site may not be ready to do it today. A lot of it is because it's not the right time. They're competing priorities. They're a small site. They can't take it on right now. All kinds of reasons, many of them legitimate. But it's no longer about, is eSource real? I think people recognize that now. I think that's the consensus.
Yeah, it's never the right time. I mean, it's like having a baby or buying a house. It's never the right time until it is.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Necessity. I met with Mount Sinai Hospital. I don't think they're using your eSource, but they might be. But they're using eSource, and they implemented it this year. And for an institution like that, it makes a lot of sense because they have 50 people on a delegation log for any given study. And they have people just, coming from all different departments needing to look at source and sign. Like, it makes so much sense for those guys. It also makes sense for the large and even some of the medium-sized sites where most of the studies are being conducted are at those small sites.
Yeah.
And it's extremely fragmented.
Yeah.
And those are the tough sells because it's just mom and pop. And they're never going to be ready. I don't think they're ever going to be ready until they see the value and the efficiency that it can create for them. That's my take on eSource. Actually, one of my sites is using Clinical Research IO. I didn't realize it until I was looking at their bookkeeping, and I noticed Clinical Research IO. So they're using it for the CTMS.
Right.
They don't necessarily. They're not necessarily using the eSource aspect.
Right.
As far as I know, but they are using the CTMS. So I do think that is a good gateway drug or Trojan horse into the sites is the CTMS.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely sites that want to do technology. They want to go all the way in technology, but they don't want to do that all at once. So a lot of companies will stage it. So we'll start with CTMS now. We'll go to eReg next, and then we'll go to eSource. That's sort of the natural progression. Some sites go from completely full of paper, that's all it is, no technology, to all in. They do the whole eSource CTMS package all at once. In some ways it might be easier because they don't have a legacy software system to worry about. They don't have to worry about data migration. And they have huge efficiencies to gain.
Yeah.
Starting
now, what do you feel? You just interviewed me, but now I'm interviewing you, so I get to ask some questions. Like, as far as EHRs, okay, I mean, the industry, this is like one of the biggest things they talk about. I went to an investigator meeting just this weekend. Okay, this is August 2018. It's almost 2019.
Yeah.
I went to an investigator meeting, so it's not just me saying this. The medical monitor stood up and asked all 50 sites, who's using EHR? Raise your hands. Nobody is using EHR. Is this something that is actually important.
We hear that a lot. I think there's a conception in a lot of places that research sites are using electronic health records, and they're not. And we know that from talking to sites, but we've also done an actual survey. So we hired a third-party market research firm, and they conducted a web survey of research sites. We got well over 100 responses, and I was about 75 to 80% of the sites on average are not using the EHR for source data capture. A much higher percentage, probably half the sites, particularly the ones that are physician practices, are using the EHR as a source of recruiting patients.
Mm-hmm.
The vast majority of physician practices are using the EHR for scheduling because you have to block it on the doctor's calendar. So there is a role for EHR in research, but they're not designed for source data capture. It's very hard to pre-program templates. They don't always have the most accurate and up-to-date information. So even if you could seamlessly take EHR data and put them into the EDC, which I know is sort of a pipe dream for a lot of people, it's not going to make sense because you have to curate the data. So if you look at your own medical records, it's probably filled with things that aren't accurate, things are outdated, diagnoses that were hypotheses that were not the ultimate diagnosis. But nobody bothers going in and curating and scrubbing it all. It just kind of accumulates and grows and grows and grows.
Right.
So it's not even that accurate. It's basically it's a source of data. It's an input into the overall PI's assessment. So it just does not serve research very well. There is a small group of sites that do use EHR. Some of the larger practices mandate that. Some of the hospital systems mandate that. Some of the academic centers have gone in that direction. We think it's about 10 or 15% of the research site market. The EHR is entrenched. So it is a reality we have to deal with. But I think its role is often overstated.
I do too.
Yeah.
And for the reasons you mentioned, actually at this IM, an investigator raised their hand and explained why they're not using it, and it's for that same reason. In one of their, because in a EHR, you're gathering medical records from many different providers. So oftentimes, like you said, when there's an error, like they brought up the case of a patient being diagnosed with cancer when they never got cancer.
Right.
But imagine if that was seamlessly integrated in an eSource, and now you've got SAEs and SUSARs, which don't belong there.
Right. Yeah, you can. You have to have some type of a reconciliation workflow. So at some point, our company will build an EHR integration. It's on our roadmap. It's something that we want to do. We recognize it's a reality for a lot of sites, and we recognize it's an important source of data. But when time comes to build that integration, we'll build a workflow in that actually brings in the information, allows the user to reconcile. And so there'll be an audit trail that basically said this was actually in the EHR, but it was rejected. It wasn't entered into the study record for these reasons. And these were two other things that were not in the EHR, but were added to the study record because the study cares about OTC drugs, and a lot of people aren't recording over-the-counter drugs in your medical records. It's just not something that comes up. It's not something you get a prescription for. So for us, it would be the key would be the workflow. You have to have a workflow that makes sense. So you have to take advantage of what the EHR is good at, and then integrate that part into the research workflow. But it can never be. It's not well designed to be the source, the record of source.
Mm-hmm.
The way we think.
And it's so refreshing to have a vendor founder that started at the site level, and we're going to get into the origin stories now. But most vendors are not started by people that used to work at sites. They're started by people who read white papers and think that there's a gold mine.
Right.
Like EDC is a perfect example. Everyone's making the best EDC, ever. But in reality, the best EDC ever is already here. There's like 3 of them you can choose from, and they're pretty much the same at the end of the day. So what real innovations do you have? But coming from the site level, Raymond, how did you get started? What was your role in research early on?
Yeah, so I actually bought a research site back in 2012. I did not come from the industry. I had a consulting background. I worked across a lot of industries. So I entered the industry with a bit of an outsider perspective, and then I had a very, very rude awakening. I found it very hard to run a research site with paper. I found it extremely hard to keep track of all the protocol rules. I would end up writing source templates and the team wouldn't necessarily follow it. I had turnover issues. I had just a lot of quality issues, and I found it very hard to manage quality. And so I found myself staying up late, doing queries, solving things, fixing deviations, doing capital plans, the works. It was very unpleasant. And out of that frustration was born this idea. I said to myself, well, why are we using paper? Why don't we just automate all of this? Because when I think about all the common mistakes that a site can make, probably 80% of it will go away if we just have the right automation, right? Like, why am I wasting time putting in, why am I checking the date? I don't remember the date. I'm probably going to misdate something. So if I misdate something, what do I have to do? I have to cross it out, right? You know the drill. Like, I dated it the 18th and it's actually the 19th. So you know what I have to do? Cross out the 18th, put the 19th, put the date. I'm correcting the date. I mean, this thing just keeps going on and on and on. And so I thought to myself, well, why don't we just build a software system that works for research sites? And we'll start with research sites because if we're going to solve the problem, we have to solve it at the root level, which is at the level where the patients are being collected and the data is first being captured. If we have that workflow down, we can solve all kinds of problems for the industry. And so I had my partner and I, we started this business, Clinical Research IO, in 2015. I took a bunch of my paper source templates, drove down to his place, showed it to him and said, can you automate this? Can you build software like that does this? And he took one look and said, yeah, it's easy. It's not hard to build a data capture tool. I think the hard part and what we brought to the table was an understanding of site workflow and how sites really work. And it isn't simply just a place where you add data. It's the whole workflow, from scheduling patients, from being able to update patient statuses, to the very concept that when I write a progress note, I may want to save it as a draft first without necessarily publishing it, because I don't have time in the middle of the visit to write a long, detailed, thoughtful note. But I don't want to lose that train of thought. So just the very concept that we have this workflow where I can start a progress note, save as a draft, and come back and finish it, and see all my draft notes in one place. That's, that comes from an understanding of what it's like to be a coordinator and what it's like to be in the site. And so we built a site-friendly, site-centered tool that allows sites to be more efficient and more productive. And even though the industry isn't quite there yet in terms of integrating eSource with EDC, that's something we're working on. Sites are saying themselves, I don't need the EDC integration right now. I am getting efficiencies today.
Yeah.
Just by not having to print things out, correct all my mistakes, do my BMI calculations online, all those little things that take 10 seconds here, 2 minutes there, 5 minutes there, all that stuff adds up.
Yeah. That sounds great. And what does the hardware look like? Is this something that can be done on my iPad, or I need a special hardware?
It's web-based, so you can use any device. You can use laptops. You can use a tablet. We built it so it's mobile friendly. So the device that we recommend is about 8 inches, which is enough to hold in one hand. So you can walk into the exam room with one hand and then use your other hand to capture data. If you're using a modern tablet, it's not our voice recognition, it's there, so it comes with. You can now dictate your progress notes.
Yeah.
You can just walk out of the exam room. You don't have to print things out, and you don't have to put together binders. And then it's there. It's on the web. There's no printout. A lot of people think, eSource, I have to go, capture it on a PDF kind of filler with pen and paper, then go and plug it in and print it out. No, it's not like that. I'm going to use my finger. I'm not going to use any type of imaging. It's not going to be like a pen and paper. I'm just going to click on the answers that make sense. And then I go online and I can see it as web-based, and it's available right then.
Interesting. So for example, let's say vital signs, you get to that point. You use your finger and type 122 over 78.
Yep. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. And if it's out of range that you set based on your thresholds or whatever the study parameters are, there can be alert, and there can be a requirement that there be a assessment of clinical significance by the PI.
Yeah.
Absolutely program it that way.
And I think this would help with PI oversight as well. I know that's why some of the larger institutions use it. Like Mount Sinai I use as an example. Not even sure if I should talk about that, but I am. So their PI oversight has improved tremendously by using eSource.
That's what the PIs and by the way, usually the most resistant group is the PIs. I'm not sure why, but maybe because physicians got burned so much with EMR integrations, they're very skeptical of technology. Mm-hmm. But typically, the PIs are the most resistant group. But after they start using this, after a few months, they realize themselves, I don't have to rely on another person, i.e. the coordinator, to tell me what's going on. I don't have to rely on someone else to bring things for me to sign. I don't have to ask the coordinator
Yeah.
to pull a binder down because I don't have time to go look for a binder. I can log in at any time, anywhere. I can see all the data in one place. I know what's going on. I can see the comments that the monitor left behind. I can answer the monitor comments directly. I don't need an intermediary. I have total control. And the PIs that sort of get this insight view this like one of us says like a cockpit fighter. Like I feel like I'm in the cockpit and I'm controlling a plane and I have control.
Yeah.
I get all my information in one place. I got my dashboard. I got my works, my to-dos, and it feels empowering for PIs.
I think we probably need to talk later about getting one of my other sites signed up because I think I see an immediate need for this there. So walk me through how a PI, and then we're going to get to the CRAs in a bit too. Walk me through how a PI would, let's say a visit 1 just happened. Okay, the coordinator put in all the data. Walk me through how a PI would go in and e-sign that they've reviewed.
Yeah. We've created a special workflow for this. Basically, and the site can turn on this setting or not turn on the setting, but the site has an SOP that says the PI signs off on at the end of each visit, which most sites do, not all, but most. The PI can log in and he or she will see this tab saying visit to sign off, right? So we'll go there, they'll see a visit to sign off, click on it, see the actual visit. You can scroll down and then you can leave comments and do whatever, leave a progress note, and then click this button called PI sign off. And then he'll attach his e-signature to it, which has the attestation, I have reviewed this source. Once he does that, it gets removed from the queue. He doesn't see it anymore. And that's
so it's just like they would sign a EDC.
Exactly like an EDC. So it works as long as your PI logs in, regularly, 3 days a week, 4 days a week.
Right, because if they're not logging in except once a month, then the oversight issue becomes
Yeah,
even if they claim, hey, I looked at the eSource on my coordinator screen, if they don't actually log in and do it, it shows that they didn't do it.
You can do that a few times, right? And those sites will use paper.
I gotcha. This is actually, I mean, the more I'm looking into it, the more I can see some use for some of our sites. Now, CRAs. Actually, I talked to one again. This is why I like investigator meetings. You get to like pick different people's brains. So one of the CRAs, that's a good friend of mine. By the way, phenomenal lady, 80 years old, still going strong, sharp as ever, like not retiring anytime soon. She's using eSource. She's monitoring on eSource. And she's one of the first monitors actually monitoring eSource studies at her company. So she's like a trailblazer in this. 80 years old and is a trailblazer in technology. But she says it's pretty easy for her. It's just she needs 2 screens. Yeah. So she's got one screen for the EDC and then another monitor screen for the eSource, and that's how she does the SDV. So what have monitors' feedback been? Do they prefer this? Because she said it took her a while to get used to it, but now she prefers it. But she knows colleagues that are very hesitant to do this.
If you ask a CRA who hasn't been exposed, at least to our system, conceptually, do you like the idea of eSource? Most of them will say no. Mainly because I think a lot of it has to do with the EMR experience where there's over the shoulder, right? They can't really log in. Someone has to stand over the shoulder. Nobody really likes that, or a site has to print it out. And so they always kind of wonder, is this the latest version, or does somebody modify it and then not print out the latest version?
Yep.
So there's all these conceptions about what eSource is, but once CRAs get into it and start using at least our system, the vast majority really like it. And we know that because we hired a third-party research firm to survey our CRA users. So it's an anonymized survey, and somewhere around 3 to 1 or 4 to 1, CRA said that our system was superior to paper on different dimensions. So like data integrity, obviously, ability to facilitate rigorous QA, et cetera. So that was like the quantitative proof, but we've heard anecdotally that a lot of CRAs, they start using it, they really like it. Some of them even just mention it to other sites, and sometimes we get referrals from sites who have been referred to us by their CRA.
Now, is there a different? Does your product support e-reg, or can that still be paper?
We're yeah,
Uh,
and we're working on that. We want to be a comprehensive solution. Most sites want a single vendor to do all of their modular
yeah.
workflows. So we are working on that. And many of our sites are using another e-reg vendor. Some of them using paper. That's fine. We don't care.
Okay.
If they want to use
So
ours, great. If not,
it's still primarily for the eSource, and you do have e-reg solutions.
we're working on it. Let's put it
Working on it. Okay,
yeah, we should.
that'll come. That'll come. I think the need is greater for the sites for the actual eSource. I think the need is greater for the reg for the sponsor, so they can manage that remotely as opposed to waiting for the CRA to scan it every time they're at the site.
Yeah, the source is the big productivity gain, right? Because that's probably where 80% of the effort goes.
Hmm. Hmm.
Most reg is signatures and some filing. The delegation, the training is actually a big workflow. We're hoping to have some efficiencies there and
Yeah.
we spec'd out. So when we have our e-reg solution, I think there'll be some pretty interesting things that we can do.
And are you prepared or ready or comfortable to talk price point with for the podcast?
Yeah, basically our pricing is per visit and a per study. So the per visit is anywhere from $9 to $20. I know it's a big range, but it depends on how many modules you buy and whether you're willing to make a commitment up front annually, monthly, or pay as you go without a volume
Okay.
commitment. And then the per study is an archiving fee. It is 500. That covers the electronic archiving. So if you think about it, on
Mm.
a study, you get 1,000+ record retention, hopefully more. And then you have to turn around and box it up and bring it to a storage locker and pay that storage locker every year for 10 to 15 years. You can group them all. Obviously, you can put lots of studies into one storage locker, but each study is a banker's box. And if you actually sit there and calculate the math, it's about $500 is roughly
Hmm.
what you're spending per rata for each study. So that's what we're asking the sites to spend. What that means is that a site can retrieve the documents at any time. 8 years after the study, even if you terminated your license, you can log in at any time and you can grab your data from our servers, where we
Interesting.
have backup redundancy security. It's probably a lot safer on our servers than anywhere else.
Right. I think the value of it being web-based or cloud-based is really good because it eliminates the hardware. All the studies I mentioned that we're using eSource
Yeah.
for, they're all sponsor provided. So they have their own clunky tablet they
Yeah.
send you
Yeah.
with a stylus.
Yeah.
And so it really doesn't feel like eSource
Right.
because it's not. It's just paper. It's the same thing as paper.
It's meant to be an electronic version of paper. So the one approach is people are used to paper, so let's just make this look like a piece of paper, and the stylus would be a pen, and I'm going to fill it in the way I do pen and paper, which is, I think, the old school approach. The approach we took is people get technology, they use it every day, it's
Yeah.
ubiquitous, it's all the apps on the phone. You give a 5-year-old kid a cell phone, and they'll be doing all kinds of games on there. So what we tried to do is make it look more like a modern app and just take advantage of the efficiency that technology brings. So it's bring your own device, anything connected to the web. Most parts of the country, the internet's very reliable. It just doesn't go out as often as people think. It's becoming like electricity. It's becoming
Yeah.
ubiquitous. And you can use the device that you want. You can use a voice recognition technology. You can use alerts. You can program, email alerts. You can do all kinds of things with that.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm just trying to think of where the industry's I'm hoping that as sponsors start adopting eSource, that they don't all go the route of their tablet.
Yes.
And I think the reason they're doing that is they could look at the timestamps. Not saying they can't do that on yours, but I guess if the site only has one tablet and one stylus, they know the PI actually has to be there as opposed to remotely signing off, right?
Could be. Could be that these tablets have offline capability. So could be
Yes.
that one site that says we don't have Wi-Fi.
Mm,
A lot of these technology decisions are sort of driven to accommodate that one or two rare sites that have a particular
Yeah, yeah.
which creates inefficiencies for everybody. So our point of
That's a
view
good
is that,
point.
yeah,
That's a
people
good
get
point.
web-based technology, and that's more efficient. Some of this could be as simple as the company that did this started this at a certain point in time where that was the right decision.
Yeah, this. Now that I think more about it, this study is a mobile study. The assessments are supposed to be done in an assisted living facility, so
Right.
you got to be able to. But it would make even more sense to use something like what you have as opposed to that tablet. You don't want it getting lost. What if it gets lost, or a car runs over it, or it just overheats? It runs out of battery. I mean, it'd be nice to just pull up my
Yeah, exactly.
eSource with my phone, right?
Yeah. So our current technology, or at least our standard offering, actually doesn't have offline access. Because if there were offline access, you get into issues around, well, what happens
Yeah,
if you are editing the visit at the same time and they both hit submit, or they both get into a web zone at the same time, and
right,
you can have some major problems. So the only way it works is you have to have a checkout and check-in process. Well, you can imagine how
yeah,
frustrating it's going to be when somebody checks something out and then somebody else, they forget to check it back in, and somebody else is locked out of the visit, right? It's enormously frustrating.
right.
So we have purposely chosen to do a always on kind of connection assumption. And if anything breaks down with the internet connection, you can always use paper and then upload it later on in our system, because we allow the ability to upload images like PDFs and attach
Hmm.
it to a visit.
Yeah, I don't think this study is going to allow us to switch to another vendor. I mean, it's worth
Right. Yeah.
it's worth asking, but they've seems like they already have that infrastructure set up. But all of our other studies can support that, so I do see
Yeah.
some value, at least for one of my sites. So really good stuff. I know we didn't get too much into the origins, but we got enough of it to know that you got in, you found a problem, you understood what the sites were dealing with, and you created a more efficient way to go about the workflow on a day-to-day basis. Now, how does the is the CTMS separate?
It integrates, or you can use them separately. You can use them on a modular basis. So if you choose to get the eSource and the finance, we're unique in that while you're collecting your source data, the finance is working in the background, calculating your receivables.
I
So
see.
if you answer yes to the question, was a second urine pregnancy test done? It knows you did a repeat UPT. It
I
knows because
see.
you told the system that yes means that a repeat UPT was done. So you don't have to do anything.
Does do you charge more if you have the CTMS, or you buy one you get both?
Well, that's what that $9 to $20 pricing range. It depends
Ah, okay.
on the modules you buy, right? So
I
the absolute
see.
lowest cost $9 is eSource only, and I'll pay everything up front based on a fixed volume.
Yes. Okay. Very good, Raymond. Anything else I'm not asking?
No, I think that's everything.
It's good. This was fast. I finally saw the value. I think this weekend's investigator meeting got my wheels turning a bit, and this interview. I like the cloud-based aspect, so I do think there is value, even for the smaller sites at this point.
Yeah, absolutely, definitely. And we're getting smaller sites. We're getting sites as small as one coordinator, all the way up to the big networks.
That's good. Well, we'll be talking off air, but thank you, Raymond,
Thank you.
and thank you, Guru Nation, for listening and watching. This is Dan from the Clinical Trials Guru. Take care.
Thank you.